It's the summer transfer window, and that means one thing. Hundreds of teams are going to rebuild their squads in real life. These rebuilds will see millions of pounds thrown around, while thousands of players will move teams, but in the chaos, every single one of these clubs will claim that they have a cunning plan. We can actually learn a lot from this chaos and from looking at rebuilds of the past. If you're a fan of realism in career mode, these rebuilds also let us combine rebuilding with reality, allowing you to do the most fun thing in career mode and rebuild any team realistically in just 3 steps. Today I'll be sharing these 3 steps with you so you can make your Manchester United teams into realistic champions, your Valencia team into title contenders, and even realistically rebuild your Mansfield Town squad into promotion heroes. Before we start talking about career mode, I think we should start by looking at 4 case studies where clubs have rebuilt in real life. I think it makes sense to start with one of the highest profile rebuilds of all time, which happened in the summer of 2009 when Real Madrid tried to rebuild their entire squad. The rebuild happened surprisingly quick. On Monday the 7th of July, they signed 2007 Ballon d'Or winner Kaká for £55 million. Only 4 days later, they had a bid accepted for £80 million to sign Cristiano Ronaldo, who'd won the 2008 Ballon d'Or. The same summer saw Karim Benzema, Xabi Alonso, Alvaro Negredo and Alvaro Arbeloa all join Madrid. With over £250 million spent, which is the rough equivalent to about £600 million thanks to 2024's inflated fees, Madrid only really let Robben, Schneider, Huntelaar and Saviola leave that year. There was a clear plan to the signings, with their attacking rebuild being finished off the year after, thanks to the signings of Angel Di Maria and Mesut Ozil for a combined £50 million. In the space of 2 seasons, Madrid went from having an attack with the average age of 27 to having 3 of the best young attackers in the world, while also adding to their already solid midfield and defensive units. It was a classic rebuild, but it's one that we can learn a lot from. In more modern times, Borussia Monchengladbach rebuilt to attempt a rise from the lower table of Bundesliga fodder to legitimate European place contenders. Rather than signing the very best player in each position, Mönchengladbach signed the likes of Marcus Thuram, Dennis Zakaria, Breel Mbolo, Florian Neuhaus and Nico Elvedi, giving them a good core of German-speaking young talent with massive room for growth. There was a lot of continuity in the squad in the form of Lars Stindl, Raphael and Fabian Johnson, but this set of players went from starting every game the year before to only being support players on the bench in 2020. This style of rebuild is ultra cost effective, as young talent is of course a lot cheaper than proven players in their prime, but also carries a lot more risk. It's a very different kind of rebuild to what Madrid did, but Mönchengladbach's is important to know about. One of the biggest single season rebuilds happened in Nottingham over the summer of 2022. As Forest relied on 8 loan players to get promoted, a large section of their squad had expiring contracts and wouldn't have even been extended if they had stayed in the Championship. But thanks to the money in the Premier League, Forest would spend over £200 million on over 30 players, but almost all of them came in with the same philosophy. They were low upfront cost young players with lots of add-ons if they were going to be successful. The strategy looks like it's finally paying off 2 years later, with £11 million signing Murillo now valued at £60 million, £3 million signing Callum Hudson-Odoi valued at about £45 million, and several other players in the squad valued around the same level. This rebuild focused on buying underrated players from other teams in the league, while also pairing them with experienced free agents from around Europe, such as Atletico Madrid's former centre-back Felipe, the Swiss international centre midfielder Remo Freuler, and of course PSG's Keylor Navas. While Forest spent a lot of money, it didn't really come close to Chelsea in 2023. They spent nearly £500 million, and this is about equivalent to what Real Madrid spent back in 2009, but the strategy was totally different. Only Nkunku and Sanchez were signed over the age of 22 years old, and these 2 players are only 25. It's clear that the aim of the game for Chelsea's rebuild was signing lots of potential. This strategy would be viable for any team that has a strong starting 11 already. This is because only a few of these players were actually bought to go straight into the first team. This didn't really work as planned because there were several that were thrown into games thanks to massive injury crisis at Chelsea last year. It's too recent to say if Chelsea's rebuild will work at all, but over the next 5 years, I think a lot of the players they've bought will end up at major clubs around Europe. This rebuild might mean that they miss out on the next Kevin De Bruyne or Mo Salah thanks to the amount of churn they'll go through, but with any luck, there could be a second Eden Hazard or a second Didier Drogba in their signings. So now we've talked about some real life rebuilds, and you can see some sort of variations and some sort of similarities between all four of these examples. The first thing every single one of these teams did though was evaluate the starting squad. There's no point rebuilding if you end up with a weaker squad, because Madrid didn't bother replacing Ramos or Pepe because they already knew they were good enough. There was no need for them to go out and sign someone like Rio Ferdinand, who was probably a higher reputation player than them at the time, but he was older and potentially on the decline. As the first step in the process, this is by far the most important thing you can do. Unfortunately, we don't quite have the same amount of detail that these clubs would have had in real life, but with Squad Hub, you can easily find holes in your squad quite easily. If we go back to that Real Madrid example, they knew that Pellegrini would be playing a 4-2-3-1 formation, and they knew the weakest area of the squad was transitioning the ball from midfield into attack. This made the signing of Kaká absolutely crucial. His pace and technique were elite for the years before this move. This combination worked better for the style of play that Real Madrid were looking for, whereas Wesley Sneijder was more of a traditional number 10 signing. Replacing Robben for a higher potential and younger Cristiano Ronaldo also made sense for long-term planning. It's hard to say that either of these signings didn't pay off. And this should be something you do on day one. Analyze the squad and identify where you have old or low potential players in the most important areas for your tactic to work. Our Forest example gives a different view of this. They had a step up in level, and this made every player seem weak or low potential. So instead, they kept a good core of players that could potentially step up in the future, while trying to supplement them with players that would help support them while the whole team would grow and develop as a single unit. So now we've pinpointed the most important areas for you to improve in your squad, it's time to create what is known as a long list. Because we're keeping our rebuilds as realistic as possible, of course we'll have to take into account the ages, nationalities and abilities of our existing squad, as well as the types of players that the club likes to sign in real life. Our Monchengladbach case study is a great example of how to do this. The squad had a few Swiss players before the rebuild, and of course, Swiss players will speak German 99% of the time. This helped them settle in faster, and it also allowed a more aggressive type of rebuild where you can sign more players, or players that maybe need to settle in a little bit longer. If you want examples of this, keep in mind if your club has a lot of French-speaking African players, then players from France and North Africa would be more realistic than signing 10 players from Norway. It's an easy thing to keep in mind, and it really does help with realism. The Chelsea example is an example of how not to do this. Their team has a big mix of nationalities, ages, backgrounds and personalities, which did play a massive part in how slow their start to last season was. So now we know what nationalities, ages and positions we're looking for, our final step is one of the most important when it comes to keeping your club healthy. It's all about setting the right budget for your situation. If Forest had rebuilt with Chelsea's budget, they could have ended up in a really bad situation had they not survived. If they'd have used Monchengladbach's budget, they probably wouldn't have even been able to afford 10 players, let alone the 30 that they signed. Before you start signing players, have a look on websites like Transfermarkt and Capology to figure out the kind of signing value and wages that your club like to offer. EA have actually made it quite easy to sign any player in any division, and with the previous steps completed, you should now be able to figure out how many players you can afford from your budget. Remember that younger players will cost more transfer budget but less in wages to a similarly rated senior player. You could easily sign someone like Morocco's 74 overall striker Ayoub El Kaabi while managing Accrington Stanley, but their weekly payroll in real life is just £35,000, which is just over £1,000 per player per week. This makes signing a player on £20,000 a week both unrealistic and also hilariously unbalanced. Instead of signing someone like El Kaabi, you could sign someone more realistic like Sonny Perkins from Leeds. He would save you about £19,000 a week of wages. He also has a more realistic nationality, and he has potential to actually be better than El Kaabi by the time you need him to be about 75 rated. With a good idea of where your squad is weak, knowledge about what kind of players your club signs and knowing how much they spend on them, you now have a pretty solid base for rebuilding realistically. If your club goes out to sign the best players, that's realistic for you to do. If you think your club is in a position like Forest were, where you need an entire rebuild, then even signing 30 players can be realistic, as long as you really need to do it. Hopefully this video will help you to build a team that you love using, and one that you can make tons of memories from career mode when you've rebuilt them. If you've got any tips that you think I've missed, please leave them below in the comments, because some of the best information I've ever read about career mode has been in comments of random people's videos. But thank you for watching. Like the video if you're going to give any of these steps a go, and check out this video if you want some save ideas for clubs that you can rebuild. But thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Cheers and goodbye.